Gordon Ramsay or somebody that's like that, kind of yelling orders or telling you need to do this now, or whatever. And for a lot of people, and I've seen this before, and I think you might be a little bit like this. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but when somebody drives you, it kind of pushes you to work that much harder uh, to achieve the goal. But then somebody like myself, I often that kind of it scares me more and it makes me
Right.
lose my confidence, and maybe I'm doing something wrong. I don't know, but I think the personalities. It's the same thing with talking about God to somebody that they might be somebody that needs. Like I know some people personally that I feel they would need it a little bit more. I don't know if the harsh isn't the right word, or maybe harsh is the right word. What do you think?
Well, I think not necessarily harsh. Some people just need a firmer message, I guess.
Yeah, and people are like, especially these days, I think because of some of the unfortunate legalism that we've seen in the past,
Right.
it obviously it's coming back. It's coming back the other direction, and what unfortunately ends up being the case far too often is that instead of coming somewhere closer to the middle or a little bit further to the right, we go way too far to the right or way too far to the left, and it doesn't work either way. That way. So,
Do you remember? Did were you with were you with the group that went to Brown University?
yes, you mean when we had this was a few years. Well, how many years ago was it now? It's,
That was 2006.
yes. So Josh and I, we first met at Hassan College through a Christian organization called Chi Alpha Campus Ministries. And during that time, we had a chance to go to this conference over a weekend. And Josh, go ahead and just explain what you were talking about there.
I thought that was a good example of, I mean, at least the interactions I had were good examples of, I'd say, not necessarily appropriate, but effective ministry evangelism, where we went out, we were in pairs, which is obviously a good idea, and we just went up to people and just asked them what their thoughts on God were. We enforced, we're trying to get them engaged in a conversation. Try to, and and then some people didn't really want to discuss them. We just, let them be. We didn't like say, okay, you don't want to talk to me, go to hell.
Mm.
We we said, like, okay, we understand, but we were just trying to, because that's one of the things that our culture does, because we are so comfortable and we have so much entertainment that our ability to stop and have silence and actually think about life is very limited.
Hmm.
One of the purposes there is just get to people thinking, just to bring the idea. Maybe they hadn't thought about God and what God is in their life for 5 years because they've been so busy, wrapped up in whatever they're doing.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true.
And so I thought that, and that's one of the things is just really important in our culture today. Is
Mm.
just you know it doesn't even you'd be surprised just getting them to think about it is maybe enough in essence, then without having to do much. Because if they because what I remember, there's a guy named Rob, Rob Bell, the guy
Yeah,
who,
yeah, yeah. I know Rob. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I know a lot of people feel he's kind of gone off into a whole different area. That's a whole different topic. But he did,
It is.
yeah. But he put out these Numa videos,
Yeah, I know the Numa videos.
and the first like five or eight of them were really good. And then I thought some of them kind of theologically kind of went off in a different area that I
Hmm.
didn't quite agree with.
Hmm.
But there was this one on, it was called Noise.
Yeah, I think I
If
recall it.
if anybody ever checks that out, YouTube that, because it's basically just, it really kind of makes you think about how we're constantly bombarded by either visual noise or auditory noise, and that our time and silence is so limited that who has the time and time and place to even think about God. And so just engaging in that conversation alone is a big deal.
It's a huge deal because we can't dismiss the fact that the world is so different now, and people are so much more busy, and we do struggle. Everybody, I even struggle sometimes to strike that balance. But I think one of the things that's just so important, a message that's so important that I've been learning over the past couple of years is the idea of learning how and when to be silent and to use silence and use the moments. Definitely to cherish those moments and use them wisely, and realize that other people are also in similar situations and they need approaches that will allow them to digest some of this stuff in amongst their busy life as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if you think about, because I showed that video in my classroom near the end of the year, because I have a homeroom full of seniors I taught Bible to, and it was a little outdated because they were talking about pagers and stuff like that, and they were like, "What's a pager?" And afterwards they were like, it's so crazy. We never have a moment without a second of some sort of noise. You live in you're in Canada, Ottawa,
right? Ontario. Yep.
Yeah, and so it's a pretty busy area. I just recently went to New York, and one of the things I took students on a senior field trip, and we went through New York, and one of the comments I got from a couple of students was like, every single person has their head down and earphones on. And so that everybody's distracted by their head, and everybody's got some sort of earphones in or earbuds in or something. And so, the conversation has to be had. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a fire and brimstone message, but conversations need to be had because people are hurting.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because it's funny that when it's right in front of our face, we say things like, well, look at all the people with their faces in their phones and their earphones. But our society, and even some of the smallest societies, are really very similar. They might be a little bit slower, but there's still a lot of it. I guess when you go to New York, you see it a lot more, but it's a very similar trend, even in rural Maine. So, but I remember I went to New York City on an evangelism trip on my senior year of Bible college, and when I was there, we used a bullhorn, like I rode this guy around town, and I was riding the car, and he had a bullhorn, and he'd drive around, and he was being funny. Well, in some senses he was being funny, but he was just trying to get the name of Jesus out there. But he was just screaming, honk if you love Jesus, U-turn for Jesus, and threw a bullhorn. And then we'd stop and we'd do street evangelism. Street evangelism is great when you're talking to people one-on-one. But I remember when I was offered an opportunity to kind of preach on the street. And although, your adrenaline is up and you're like, you can say all kinds of great things through a bullhorn, and I'm sure that somebody listened, and I think that could be effective. Definitely. But in a way, I also, as I think back on it, like it's pretty intense, because it's like, I remember when we were there were members of the Black Panther group. So everybody is trying to communicate their messages. And so obviously we have a responsibility to be different in a good way, and reach people with love and truth all at the same time. But I want to kind of transition this a little bit so we can keep going along the same lines. So getting back to the podcast a little bit.
What about fried bologna?
Fried bologna. I love fried bologna. Some people hate it. Some people think it's too greasy.
I don't know if God wants you to enjoy that. I don't know if he wants you to enjoy that, Jared.
I don't know. Well, it tastes really good.
I don't know what health benefit that's doing for you.
See, this is where it's good. It doesn't have any health benefit. No, you're right. And Joshua knows how to hold my feet to the fire, and since we're close, he can do that, and that's all good. So fried bologna, yes, I love fried bologna.
I tried it
bologna,
not that
bologna and
long ago.
ham.
I tried some fried bologna not that long ago, and it was okay. It was okay. I finally did it. I bought some bologna for the kids because they've been like, I don't know, ever since you were here last summer and you had bologna and the kids had it. The kids are always like,
They
"You get
ask for it?
bologna?"
Oh.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. They're
Well,
always they're asking for bologna, and so every once in a while I'll like buy like a quarter pound of bologna because I won't really eat it, and either will Jasmine. So, but they'll eat it all. And I fried some up. I was like, it's okay.
a little bit of moderation sometimes. I'm glad I imparted a little bit of bologna humor in there.
Yeah.
But so yeah, just everyday conversations about things from politics. Obviously, that's going to be a big one. To psychology, that's an interesting topic. Psychology and different aspects of psychology, the good, bad, and ugly. And I look forward to talking to being an American permanent resident in Canada. I have a few people here in Canada that I'm connected with. Sandra Friedman is a wonderful Christian woman who's running for a member of parliament in Canada. And
Do you even know how it works up there
she's a
yet?
millennial. Well, I understand. I understand in quite a bit. It certainly is confusing to me, but I've learned a lot, and I think I have a pretty good grasp on it. But it'll be exciting to talk to her because she does understand it and she can explain it. My wife has explained it pretty well. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I mean, for instance, we just had a provincial election, and like with the parties, like the Conservatives and the Liberals is what they're called here. Conservatives, Liberals, and New Democrats. There's a Green Party too, I believe. A party can go from being prominent and not even just majority or minority, but they can go from being a majority or a minority into actually losing their party status, which means basically they lose a bunch of seats. It's kind of obviously the Canadian model is kind of it's just like the British model, I guess, but they lose seats. And when it says lose party status, they still have a place in the parliament. Like, for instance, I think there's going to be 7 seats by the Liberals in the new parliament as we get a new provincial leader. But they lose funding and they lose all kinds of stuff. So to me, in my head, it's kind of crazy that you can go from this place of providence. The Liberals were in power, and then they lost so many seats because they have things called ridings, which are similar to districts. And they lost so many of their districts or their ridings that they've lost their party status. They still have a place there, but they're not getting any money. They have very little say, and now it's going to be controlled by the New Democrats, which are very. I think, and I've got a lot to learn. I think that they're slightly more liberal on the scale than the Liberals are, and they certainly are more social. Similar to socialism in regards to lots and lots of programs, in regards to spending money even when you don't have the money to spend, that kind of thing.
And they usually vote with the Liberals though a lot of times too.
Oh, of course, yeah. They're not going to vote. They're not going to vote with the Conservatives. Oh, very, very much at all. Very, very rarely.
So I mean, it's so funny how like in Canada you have like multiple parties. Everybody thinks it's like this great thing, you know, from America. Like a lot of Americans like, oh, we only have 2 parties, but really when it boils down to it, if you're voting on something, there's a yes or no, and people get together and form blocks, and it becomes 2-party regardless, or 2 idea.
Yep. So politics, cooking, psychology, beanhole beans. Have you ever had beanhole beans, people? Everybody out there in listener land, this is the UPbecoming podcast with Jared Grover and my guest and best buddy Joshua Hiatt. Maybe one of the next episodes. There'll be a couple of extra episodes in between, but I'm looking forward to asking Josh more questions because he has lots of great things to share about what's going on in his life and his family. I'm looking